All right, so we are here today for the October Power Hour for Renewable Heat Now. In case you are in the wrong room, that's what we're doing here today. Welcome and thanks so much for being here. This is our agenda for today. It's going to be all focused, very much focused on the New York Heat Act, which is our top priority for this upcoming year. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Renewable Heat Now for any of the people who are new. We are going to have two special guests. One is Assembly Member Kimberly Jean-Pierre, who will speak to us in just a few minutes. Then we'll have Bryn giving us a New York Heat Act teach-in. After that, we're going to take some actions, and Anshul will lead us with those. And lastly, we're going to wrap up with some next steps, such as signing up for the November Power Hour. There's going to be a whole bunch of exciting events coming up in New York City and possibly upstate. And then, of course, we have our January 23rd mobilization in Albany. All right. Thank you so much. So we are Renewable Heat Now, about 20 statewide groups that join together to accelerate the adoption of ground source, geothermal, and air source heat pumps in New York. Really, the name of the group says it all, Renewable Heat Now. So the aim is to reduce the amount of fossil fuels used to heat and cool our homes and workplaces in the state. We do education to the public about heat pumps. We also advocate for New York State policies that will enable all New Yorkers to afford to make the switch to clean energy technology and heating and cooling specifically for their homes. All right. And since buildings are the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the state, that is why we're focused on buildings. The fossil fuel emission, or the greenhouse gas emissions, come from burning fossil fuels for heating, or hot water and cooking, as well as, of course, all the methane leaks that come before the gas gets to our house from the distribution and fracking systems. All right, we can go to the next slide.
As Claire mentioned, the main reason why we're here tonight is to get educated and fired up about the New York Heat Act, which is our priority legislation with Renewable Heat Now this session. So I'm just going to take the next 15 minutes or so to walk through what the bill is and why we're really focusing on getting it passed this session. I'll say as a disclaimer, this bill is very wonky. It can be really hard to understand. So I'm going to try to take us through in very plain terms what the bill is working to do. And I'll talk about the mechanisms for how that's actually going to be achieved as they are applicable. But if you want to get into the wonk, we have plenty of resources for you. But I'm going to keep it pretty high level for tonight. And as you have questions, feel free to just put them in the chat, and then someone on our team will get them answered for you. Next slide, please. So first, I'm going to talk about why we are focusing on New York Heat this session. As all of us know, many of us want our homes to be safe, clean, and comfortable no matter the weather, but we have these outdated laws that are really rigging the system in ways that are forcing us to continue to burn this expensive, toxic fracked gas. So the New York Heat Act works to unrig this system and allow the state to build these amazing electric and renewable energy networks to heat our homes and cool them. And they will be more reliable, safer, and more affordable. And the New York Heat Act is also going to make sure that these benefits prioritize the people that need them most. So it's going to clear this path towards a more affordable, more reliable, and renewable future for all New Yorkers. And when we pass the New York Heat Act, we'll finally move out of that old rig system that's keeping us in the past and move towards these cleaner, healthier, and more affordable future that we deserve. Next slide, please. So that is why we are talking about New York Heat and why we're working on getting it passed. Next, I'm going to talk about why we're focusing on this right now. So just for some context, we have been organizing for years all across the state and have had some amazing wins. Most significantly, last session, we passed the All Electric Building Act, which was a huge, huge win over the fossil fuel lobby. And that means that with the All Electric Building Act, we've really secured this pollution-free future for new construction. But as I mentioned before, there's still this key crucial piece that's holding us back from having this full climate victory that we're really working towards. And that key piece is ensuring that the New Yorkers who are currently stuck on that old system that I mentioned are free to move into this new renewable future. Now, previous slide, please. Now, there's good news and bad news to this kind of last final piece of our puzzle that we're putting together. The bad news is that this is gas's last grip on New York. So the fossil fuel industry is going all out to prevent us from passing this bill and finishing the job. But the good news is that support for the New York Heat Act has never been stronger. The bill passed in the Senate last session, and it has amazing support in the Assembly with 72 co-sponsors as of today, plus Assembly Member Fahey, who is our prime sponsor. Now, in terms of why we're focusing on it in the budget for this session, we know that the governor has not done enough to protect our families from these predatory gas utilities. And she tried to gut our climate law last session and has been saying that climate change in New York is just a new normal. But she has this amazing opportunity to really push us into the future and give us the climate protections that we need by including the New York Heat Act in her executive budget. So she can take these meaningful steps through New York Heat to advance the climate action plan and protect consumers along the way. So last session, we proved that we can pass meaningful, huge, impactful climate legislation with the All Electric Building Act, and we are very well poised to pass New York Heat this session. Next slide, please. So I'm going to break down what exactly New York Heat does and how it helps New Yorkers in 4 major ways. And that is fighting climate change, creating safer and healthier homes, bolstering green jobs and a strong economy, and ensuring energy affordability all across the state. So we're going to break each of those pieces down next. Next slide, please. So first and foremost, New York Heat helps us to fight climate change. As we all saw all across the state, extreme weather really defined our summer. We had smoky air, we had record-breaking heat, we had flooding, and our fall's off to a bad start too. I'm here in Brooklyn and we had flooding again that completely shut down the city. So given this reality that we're facing, we can't keep asking people to pay more and more for this dirty fossil fueled system that is literally killing us. And so New York Heat works to end that. And it does that in 2 ways. First, by discontinuing these regressive rules. You might hear people talk about the 100-foot rule, and all that means is just that we're currently being forced to subsidize the frack gas industry. You might also hear about the obligation to serve, which again, is just a mandate that it mandates us to use frack gas instead of renewable heating. So instead of those old laws, New York Heat allows the state to move towards achieving strong climate justice and emissions reduction goals as outlined in our Climate Act, and enables a significant reduction of our buildings emissions by 2050. How does it do that? It aligns the public service law, which again, if you want more information on the wonks of the public service law, we have plenty of resources for you, but it aligns the public service law with the Climate Act so we can actually move towards meeting those goals of having efficient and electric homes. And it also enables this amazing thermal energy networks that provide neighborhood scale electrification. So whole communities and neighborhoods will have the benefits of the renewable heating and cooling technology that we all know and love, like heat pumps. Utilities will also still be obligated to provide safe and reliable service. So they're going to continue keeping the gas lines safe so that they're not exploding or leaking. As we know, that can both happen. But they'll also have options to avoid these costly line replacements and provide customers with renewable technology as well. So again, this is so that the utilities can comply with the Climate Act that we've already passed. And in case you haven't heard it already, buildings are the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the state. So this legislation is absolutely crucial for New York to meet its climate goals. Next slide, please. So next, moving on to health and safety. Right now, with the system that we have and the buildings that we have, communities are facing unrelenting pollution, both outside and inside our homes. And New York Heat helps to move us away from those burdens and the impacts of our frack gas infrastructure that are causing unhealthy air. So on the outside, our current system causes horrible air pollution, and New York Heat would stop the dirty and toxic expansion of this system that causes crises like pollution, wildfire, smoke, and extreme heat that I mentioned earlier. Inside, it also phases out the use of fossil fuels for space and water heating. And we know, again, that the current technology emits these very harmful pollutants like nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxide, particulate matter, carbon dioxide. And it's very important to keep in mind, too, that all of these impacts, both outside and inside, are disproportionately burdening vulnerable communities. And that includes people like children, the elderly, low-income communities, communities of color, renters, and people with pre-existing health conditions. So it's immensely important that we are working to address these health impacts, but also addressing the communities that are being impacted by them most first. So New York Heat, again, allows us to invest in these neighborhood scale clean heating and cooling projects like thermal energy networks, which will result in safer, healthier, and more comfortable homes. Next slide, please. So New York Heat Act is also going to really help our jobs across the state and our economy. Our current system is really wasting our money and investing it in this old frack gas system. Collectively, we all pay $200 million every year to unnecessarily expand gas infrastructure. So we know we need to move away from this infrastructure, but our laws are still setting us up to continue to invest in it, which is not using our money wisely. And the utility companies are going to continue to try to maintain and replace these pipelines because that's how they make their money, despite the fact that our own climate law says that we need to be moving away from them. And despite the movement of these utilities, so for example, National Grid announced that they're trying to sell off some of their infrastructure. So they know that this is antiquated, this is going to be phased out, but they're going to try fighting tooth and nail to keep us investing in this because, again, that's how they make their money. But despite this, the financial burden of maintaining and expanding our gas system is going to continue to fall on our backs, even as these systems become obsolete. And we can't afford that. So instead, with New York Heat, we will move towards getting off gas and going electric and creating massive jobs in the process. So the New York Heat Act would help to create over 200,000 new jobs, which is more than double the current employment in the building sector alone. And while we're moving this workforce away from a fossil fueled system and towards clean heating and cooling jobs, it's immensely important that we make intentional plans to protect the long-term livelihood of today's gas workers because we have tons of highly trained plumbers and pipe fitters, steam fitters that are performing jobs right now that are currently being focused on fossil fuel infrastructure, but are also very vital to the clean energy economy. Thankfully, New York passed the Utility Thermal Energy Network and Jobs Act, which works to protect workers along this transition. So the New York Heat Act and the Utility Thermal Energy Networks and Job Act really work hand in hand to protect workers along the way. And ultimately, New York Heat supports these thermal energy network union jobs and facilitates that just transition for workers that I mentioned. Next slide. Last but certainly not least, New York Heat is an incredibly important energy affordability bill. So again, with our current system, our utility bills are really regressive. They currently are forcing those with the least amount of money to pay the most. So right now, low-income New Yorkers spend an average of 10% of their income on energy. And as you all have seen, we're all stuck paying these utility bills that are just continuing to get higher and higher. The most recent rate hike that I saw is 9% on energy bills. So the New York Heat Act works to alleviate that by capping energy bills for low and moderate income households at 6% of their income. And that shakes out to about $75 a month for those low and moderate income households. And that $75 a month is really crucial. That's money that people need right now for things like rent, for their groceries, for medicine. So it just makes sense that we allow New Yorkers to use that money on the things that they need instead of paying into this old system. So again, New York Heat would help with that. Now, without this provision, the planned energy transition risks falling on the shoulders of those who are harmed already by the current system. So, for example, there's a recent study by the Building Decarbonization Coalition that we can dig the link up for, and it shows that as New York electrifies, for heating and hot water, the families who are left behind on that old system could see their gas bills raised by thousands of dollars if we don't pass New York Heat. So New York Heat can also, in addition to making sure that everyone is kind of brought along that transition, that the financial burden isn't falling on people's backs, it also supports a really crucial part of electrification, which is retrofits. So I talked earlier about how the All Electric Building Act helps with new construction. Having some retrofit support in New York Heat will help with our existing buildings too. So retrofits can support all New Yorkers, especially those low and moderate income households that I mentioned, by providing incentives and rebates for retrofits. And these retrofits really help to keep homes safe from the extreme weather that we've been facing, and also saves them money on their heating and cooling. Last year, Governor Hochul, as I mentioned, tried to gut our climate law, and she used this justification of saying, okay, sure, we need to transition away from fossil fuels, but we need to make sure that we're keeping the individual costs down as we're moving towards this clean energy future. And the nice thing is that New York Heat does that. And it does it without fueling climate catastrophe. So it allows us to move towards this clean energy future and provide the necessary funding to bring everyone along the way. So ultimately, New York Heat, it's a pro-climate bill, but it's also going to cut costs and help save New Yorkers money. Next slide. So I just gave a very brief run through of how the New York Heat Act helps to fight all of these different pillars, or improve all of these different pillars across the state. So just to reiterate, on the climate end, it empowers the Public Service Commission to equitably achieve the climate goals that we set out in the Climate Act. On the health end, it ends this fossil fuel pollution, both inside and outside of our homes. On the jobs end, it stops wasting our money in an old system and instead facilitates a just transition for our workers. And on the energy affordability end, it provides financial relief to the homes that need it the most, especially those that are already being negatively impacted the most by our current fracked gas system. Now, the fossil fuel industry and utilities are really picking pockets right now. As I said, I think in almost every slide, they're trying as hard as they can to continue to make these big profits. But we know that this industry and this system is causing us to get hotter, sicker, and it's making many things more expensive. So the New York Heat Act, as we're going into this legislative session, it's a really amazing opportunity for the governor to make responsible use of our money and to allow the state as a whole to meet our demands of today, like keeping our homes safe, clean, and comfortable, while also preparing for what we need in the future, what we need right now, which is a better New York that is ready to face the impacts of the climate crisis. And we are so well poised to pass this legislation this session. I hope this was helpful as you are thinking about how you can advocate for this bill in many different ways. Feel free to go back and watch this as many times as you need. We're recording tonight, or to look at the slides, and we'll work to answer your questions. But for the time being, I'm going to pass it off to Anshul, who's going to tell us how we're actually going to get this bill passed this session. So go ahead, Anshul.
Thanks, Brent, for that excellent introduction to the New York Heat Act. So this fall, which is right now, the target of our advocacy efforts in getting this bill passed is Governor Hochul. And the reason is that if the governor includes this bill in her next budget proposal, which will come out in January of 2024, then that makes it very likely that the bill will pass because the budget bills are must-pass bills. So we can pass New York Heat with the budget, just like we passed the All-Electric Building Act last year. So the Senate actually passed this bill as a standalone bill last session, but the bill failed to get support from Governor Hochul, and the Assembly also didn't pass the bill. So after the governor puts out her budget proposal, we will shift our focus to the Assembly. Next slide, please. To build grassroots support for New York Heat Act, to basically support our advocacy efforts, this fall, the Renewable Heat Now campaign launched a statewide chili tour, in which we have these fun events all over New York with food, education, and advocacy. People learn about the New York Heat Bill, just like you all learned about it now, with sort of did they eat delicious chili and other food cooked on all-electric induction cooktops. And then they signed postcards asking Governor Hochul to include all provisions of the New York Heat Act in her executive budget. As Bryn explained, there are several parts to this bill. It's a complicated bill, and we want every piece of this bill included in the next budget. So we are halfway through the Chile tour, and it's been great gathering with students, advocates, and elected officials. But you can help make the rest of the tour even better. So I will put a link in the chat. The first thing you can do is to sign up to attend an event near you. And there's a link in the link to a link tree in the chat that I just put in. So if you could take a minute to go to that link and sign up, or at least look for an event near you and bookmark it, that would be great. You would also notice that the first link in the link tree is to sign an electronic postcard, which sends a message to the governor that asking her to include the bill in the next executive budget. So if you could also take a few seconds to send that postcard, electronic postcard, to her using the first link in the link tree, that would be awesome. Please do that, even if you have sent a similar message to the governor before or signed a physical postcard, because when they get a lot of such emails over a short period of time, then that gets extra attention. So I'll give everyone a few seconds, and then we'll move on to the next action. Next slide, please. So this is one of the actions that we're taking right now, and signing up for the Chile tour. So next, we want to publicize the tour and get our own friends and contacts to attend as many of these events as possible. For that, we have prepared a few Twitter actions and texts and emails that you can use. And I will put a link for that in the chat. And I know many of us are not very fond of Twitter and what's going on there right now. But unfortunately, the elected officials, including Governor Hochul, who is tagged in these actions, they are still on that platform. And if we need to sort of get their attention, unfortunately, that's what we have to do. So let me put the link to the document again, since there's a lot of action in the chat. Okay. So what we will do is, if you have a Twitter account, then we will go to the tweet at the top, and we will quote it using the text in one of the 5 options below. If you have any questions, you can put that question in the chat, but if you are familiar with the platform, it should be pretty straightforward. And we want to and please feel free to do more than one. Each one of them tags the governor, and we want as many of these on Twitter as possible. So I will give people a few seconds to complete that before we move on to the next action.
Assemblymember Levenberg, are you with us?
Oh, yeah, I'm here.
Hooray, wonderful. You are speaking with a group of wonderful activists from Renewable Heat Now. And I introduced you earlier. So I hope we're just very honored to have you here. And we know that you only have a few minutes and would love to hear your take on the New York Heat Act.
Hello, everybody. How are you? Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you this evening, and thank you for taking time out of your evening to support Renewable Heat Now. I am a proud co-sponsor of the New York Heat Act, as I know that you know, and we will push to get that done this coming session. I wish that we could have done it last budget year, but we're gonna work really, really hard this year to do it. And we did get all electric buildings done. So, again, I don't actually even know that was signed, right? Yes, that was signed. But I know that we need to keep moving forward, and we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can. I just want to tell you a brief personal story, which is that yesterday, maybe the day before yesterday, this week, very, very much. I just got back from a lovely trip to Iceland, and we got back, and we were cold, and we turned on our heat. I live in a 1920s house with radiators and gas heat. And guess what, folks? My boiler broke. So, I said, all right, finally, this is my chance is to convert to air source heat pumps. So I just had a gentleman in today to talk to me about that. And he's like, oh, you're really going to do this? I said, yes. And he looked and he saw that my hot water heater was a heat pump. And he said, oh, you did that already? Yes, I did that. And when my dryer broke, I converted my dryer to electric. And, I put solar panels on my house, and I bought an electric car, and I feel like, I have to walk the walk if that's what we're expecting everybody to do. But we also know that not everybody can afford to do this. So that's what, the New York Heat Act is all about, is making that, 6% of somebody's income maximum that they would pay. And we want to make sure that we continue again to make this something that's affordable. I've always believed in driving, that if we push, if we make these things more possible for people and we increase demand, that's how we're going to change the industry. We can't just keep making it easier and easier for the fossil fuel industry to expand and to put those, lay all of that new gas piping, because that's, back on the ratepayers. And we want to make sure that we do everything we can to segue off of fossil fuels. And the only way that we can do that is to help people understand how they can do it, how they can do it affordably, make sure that we put our money where our mouths are, make sure that we put the money in the budget to help people afford to make that transition, and encourage people to do so as soon as they can. So I'm going to continue again to push for all of the good things that are in New York Heat Act. And I hope that, I know that I can count on you and all of the advocates to continue to push too. Anshul, you've been such a great partner along the way, not only here, but in lots of things that are helping to save our environment with our Save the Hudson Bill. And I appreciate all of your help. And again, just trying to alleviate the pain for New Yorkers so that we can breathe easier, literally and figuratively. And we know that fossil fuel powered heating and appliances reduce our air quality. And that's why we have to build the infrastructure to support our future lives. Again, I just came back from Iceland and I saw a lot of the impacts of climate change as I climbed on the glaciers that are melting faster than anybody ever anticipated. And we saw an iceberg, and Anshul actually had encouraged me to go to this ice tunnel, which I didn't do, but there was one at the museum, so I got to experience it there and learn more about it. But watching the icebergs, there's these giant icebergs that have broken off of the glacier, and there was this one really huge one, and we asked the guide, how long has that been there? And we're like, hundreds of years. 23 days that one giant piece had broken off and was there. And it's just amazing how much faster climate change has exacerbated all of these changes. So we know that we have to do everything we can to keep up with our changing climate, to mitigate the human impact. And this is one step that we know that we can take from a legislative perspective. We are way behind the 8 ball. We need to start to chip away at that 8 ball and try to get a little bit ahead of it, although I think it's a little late for that, but just to keep up. And this is one way that we can do that. So again, I very, very much appreciate all of your help, all of your advocacy, and everything that you do. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mm.
And remember for joining us today and for your advocacy and support for this bill during the last session, and your continued support for this bill. And glad you enjoyed the Iceland trip. I was on a similar trip, and the people in Iceland are actually not happy that US is not taking sufficient climate action, given that US is the biggest cumulative greenhouse gas emitter, which is melting their glaciers. So
Absolutely.
They are, yeah. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yes. Are there any questions in the chat? I just want to slip. Yeah, that's right. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that information, and definitely feel free to share with my office, my legislative director is up in Albany, and all of my information is on my website. But if you want, I can put my local number here, and I can put my email here. And oh my gosh, I haven't typed my Albany number for a while. I'm sorry about that. Okay, and yeah, I'll just give you my
Natalie, I see you have your hand up. Do you have a question for the assembly member? Oh, I think.
Yes, I do. Can I just wanted to, my own assembly member is also Westchester County Assemblyman Nader Sayed, and I'm just wondering, are you advocating to all of the I've lost the word, the Westchester contingent to make
Delegation?
sure that
Yes.
all of them are on board with this.
I have to say, like, we don't necessarily nudge each other that much. We definitely leave that to our constituents and our advocates to push each other. I mean, you know, if it is our bill, then we will go and collect support for it. It's not my personal, I don't actually sponsor it, but if you believe that that would be helpful, I certainly can reach out to my colleagues and see where everybody is on it.
I think that would be terrific, because here in Westchester County, we have a couple of legislators who don't necessarily hop on to all environmental legislation. And if you are supportive of it, I like to be able to approach them by saying, all the other people in Westchester
Sure.
County are on board with this, and why are you not there yet? So
Absolutely. No, it's always good. It's always a good tactic, I think. So
thank you.
yeah, certainly can do that. Absolutely. I also will say, I had Planned Parenthood come to me today and ask me about, like, why aren't you on this bill? And I was like, what do you mean I'm not on that bill? So sometimes there's some things get lost in translation. And Angela, I think you can probably speak to that. Like, I think I was trying to get on this bill for a long time, and for whatever reason, I wasn't added as a co-sponsor. So sometimes the wheels of of progress are move very, very, very slowly up in Albany. Even just if you want to support a bill, it sometimes doesn't pop up as quickly as we would like. So it's possible that Nader did ask to be a co-sponsor and hasn't gotten there yet. I don't know if anybody's spoken to him about it personally, and he said no, but oh, he is a co-sponsor. Okay, there you have it, Angela. Okay, so he is. Thank you. You never know. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer than others to see that, but
That's great news. Any other questions for the Assembly member? I think because of you and your colleagues, we do have a great deal of momentum for this bill.
yes.
So that's
so
hopeful.
I'm
can
gonna
I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
I was just wondering, Assemblywoman, what do you feel got in the way last session of it passing, and what do you think we can do to make it pass this session?
Well, Angela and I definitely talked about this, right? I'm pretty sure we did. I think that there is fear from some of my colleagues upstate that infrastructure isn't in place. I think we heard a lot about gas stoves being stolen from people's homes, and there's a lot of fear mongering going on from the other side for that the fossil fuel industry is basically propagating. And I think that if anything, we just have to come out hard with all the facts and figures in a an easy messaging way that makes it easily digestible for those who might be on the fence for the wrong reasons, because they're again being pushed by other forces that they aren't even really aware of. So I think more than anything, coming up with those really digestible talking points, and sort of going up against the fear that, if we support this, that we're not going to have the infrastructure in place, or we're not going to have the money, or we know that that ultimately the economics is going to work out for the best here, and that's what I think we have to keep talking about, and any facts and figures that can be used to convince some of my upstate colleagues and some of those who may be more on the fence or maybe more conservative, I think would be useful.
Thank you.
I'm going to leave that to you guys to find the list of assembly members.
Yeah,
Okay.
Victoria, I think we can figure that out.
Okay, so wasn't that wonderful?
Mhm.
And once again, we are really thankful to supportive legislators like Assemblymember Dana Levenberg for getting as much traction on this bill as we have today. Okay, so let me put the link to the document one more time that we were working off of. So the last link in the, sorry, did it go to everyone? Okay, so the last link in the chat is the link to the document with Twitter posts, which I think most of you have already done. And in the interest of time, I'll just mention what's in the later in the document. So if you are not on Twitter, or if you finished the Twitter actions, and if you scroll down the document, there are some suggested texts and emails that you can send to your friends, or if you're a part of any environmental circle or local environmental group, to basically publicize the Chile tour and get as many signatures as possible on the electronic postcard to send to Governor Hochul. If you are a member of an organization that has not signed on to this letter to Governor Hochul, for which I just put a link in the, sorry, oops. Okay, this should be the right link. Yes, so I'm almost at the end before I pass it back to Claire. The last link that I put in the chat is a letter that we are trying to get as many organizations, environmental as well as other or progressive organizations within New York State to sign. That letter will go to Governor Hochul soon, and it basically includes the mostly includes the various provisions of the New York Heat Act, again, asking the governor to include those in her executive budget. So with that, I will pass it back to Claire to continue the rest of the evening.
Thank you, Anshul. And so we have just one more slide. Luis, if you could go to the next one. We have some to-dos for you. And they're luckily pretty easy. I know that there's some questions in the chat about the Long Island Chili tour. So, okay, thank you, Bryn, for answering Eric's question. The first to do is simply to sign up for the November New York Heat Action Call, which is AKA the November Renewable Heat Now Power Hour. That is what we're going to be focusing on again. Thank you, Melissa, for putting that link in the chat. We are also hoping that you sign up for the Chile tour. We are working on additional dates, but the next one that's coming up is in Rochester, in my neck of the woods. And it will be a great time at the Rochester Greentopia Eco Fest. And then we have dates coming up in Saranac Lake, and there's Buffalo, and even more than that, I think, are coming up in the next couple of weeks. There is also, we're asking folks to invite friends and family members to the Chile tour. I believe, oh yes, thanks, Mary. There's also one in Hudson coming up. I know there's still lots. Lisa is going to be so sick of Chile by the end of this. I can't even imagine. Or maybe her love for Chile will just grow. And then we've already done the digital postcard. Yes, thanks, Melissa. And then we will have in partnership with, I believe, Food and Water Watch and some other folks in the New York City area. There's going to be a press conference and rally. It will be sometime in the first few days of December to highlight New York heat again, and again, ask the governor to put it in her executive budget. Lastly, there is a rally being planned, a mobilization being planned for Albany on January 23rd, 2024. Can't believe it. But that will be our kickoff for our advocacy during the session. And we hope that we can get a large number of folks there. I know that I'm working on trying to figure out a bus coming from Western New York. So it's going to be a good time, and it is just going to be all about New York heat and getting that through in the budget this year. So thank you, Melissa, for putting the links in the chat, and I do believe they will probably be sent out to everybody who registered. So if you don't get to these to-dos right now, that is okay. Never fear. So thank you so much for sticking around for this whole hour with us. And I'm going to wrap up. If there are any last minute questions, I know I saw a few about strategy with, asking Governor Hochul to, or targeting Governor Hochul right now for New York heat. I'm sure that there are probably a number of answers to that question, but one of them is simply that, the governor has a lot of power in the budget making process. And one of the easier paths to passage for a bill is through the budget process. And so that's, one of the reasons we want to get New York heat into the budget. And that is why we're targeting the governor. All right, folks. Have an excellent evening, and we'll see you in November.